How you doing, everybody? My name's Carpo, and I'm a cannabis grower. I'm a legal cannabis medical grower, so legal issues are not, for those who are curious, they've asked me, hey, why do you put these videos online about pot? And it's because I can. Because I feel like I'm obligated to do so, only because I've spent so many years hiding with the stoners, you know, afraid of exposing ourselves because of the legal issues. But now that we can speak freely, we can start to talk about things. And among those discussions, a lot of people are reluctant to speak their minds because there's a lot of hostile opinions about growing cannabis. And I wanted to not clear up a few misconceptions necessarily, because then this will just be my speculation on these particular things. But there's a lot being learned, and you can go on the cannabis forums and you can learn a lot from these people. But there really is no major reference point to go to for some of the more detailed aspects of cannabis. And you can learn how to grow it, but something as simple as when to harvest is highly debated. Some people go for the trichomes when they're 30% amber. Some people like to wait till they're 50% amber. And for those who don't know, the trichomes, THC crystals, they will begin to amber as they decay. And some of that THC will begin to degrade. It will give you more of the sedated high, to put it simply. But harvesting earlier tends to give you a more cerebral high. Now that's just totally, you know, strain dependent. I guess sativas are more dominant in that way. Indicas are often, a lot of growers harvest them earlier. So anyway, this book I've got, which was the Indoor Marijuana Horticulture, this is considered the Grow Bible by Jorge Cervantes, and this is the newer edition, but it's still 2001. Now it's got all the basic stuff about lighting, and it's got all the nutrient deficiencies and what to look for. It's a great book for a beginner. It's a great book for an expert. And it's actually considered, to me, really is the Bible of growing, or at least has been up to this point. So I wanted to start off by this to kind of make my point, to explain a couple things about misconceptions that the millions of people who have probably bought this book have assumed that it's gospel. Well, no pun intended with the Bible thing there, but so we go to page 19 here, and it says, this is talking about hours and growing. Now, some growers leave their HID lights on 24 hours a day. Marijuana can only process 16 to 18 hours of light per day efficiently. After that, a point of diminishing returns is reached and the electricity is used inefficiently. Also see Feminized Seed in Chapter 8. Now, that got me thinking about, because I read that, I leave my lights on 24 hours a day. Not only is it easier on the bulbs and the ballast from that, you would think that turning the light off would conserve the ballast or the light, and the reality is maybe you get more hours out of your light, but my thought is that turning it on and off, all the components within there start to, you know, expand and contract, just like turning on and off computers or stereos or anything else. But the most important thing to know is that at the time when this book was written, we didn't understand what C3 plants were, or at least the cannabis growers weren't aware of this, or maybe were aware but weren't speaking about it. C3 plants are a type of plant, which I believe a majority of the plants on Earth are, which means that they do not breathe at night. They don't respire at night, only during the day. But they can utilize more light. Growers say you can get 30% more yield by leaving the lights on for 30% more time. Instead of 18, you leave them on 24. It makes total sense. Now, to the average person, they'd think, well, that's not right, because, as one guy said, in nature, they have a rest period, so, you know, I would assume they need as much in the grow room. But, like one guy said, it's like, you're putting human attributes on a plant. You cannot just say it needs to sleep or it needs to rest. And there very well may be benefit to having hours of darkness, but what I'm trying to say is that it's a highly debated issue. And a lot of growers don't want to deal with timers in their bedroom, just leave it on 24/7 and be done with it. Then there's also debates about whether or not you go from a 12 on, 12 off cycle, or you can go with a 12. Some people do a 12 on, 6 off, or a 12 off, 6 on. People have all kinds of wild ideas about what works, and honestly, it comes down to genetics most of the time, because all the growers are growing different cannabis. I grow like 5 different strains, and they all respond differently. I have Crystallica, I have 2 or 3 different Crystallica breeds, which were all phenotypes from the same batch. I'm keeping 2 of them. Then I have a grape that I grew. It was a crossbreed I made myself like 10 years ago. And I also have Harlequin Tsunami, which has no THC in it, or like less than 1%, but it's all CBD. And they all respond differently. Some of them want a lot of nutrients. Some of them don't want very many. So that's another issue, is nutrients. And people tell you, oh, it needs to have this, it needs to have that, and this is the best organic amendment. Let's go to page 279 here. This is another one. This is one that's always got me. Supersized secret. Do not remove healthy green shade leaves. Remove only dead leaves more than 50% damaged. It said, leaf removal is not pruning. It is hacking up a healthy plant. Ill-informed growers believe that removing large shade leaves makes plants more productive because it supplies more light to smaller leaves and growing tips. Wrong. This is bad gardening. Plants need all their leaves to produce maximum amount of chlorophyll and food. Removing the leaves slows chlorophyll production, stresses a plant, and stunts growth. Stress is a growth inhibitor. Remove only dead leaves or leaves that are more than 50% damaged. Now, to a degree, this is true. You do not want to destroy a cannabis plant and remove all the fan leaves at once. If you take more than 50%, it will take time to recover. I defoliate all of my plants. I take off any fan leaf. I'll give you an example here. So here's a little clone, right? Now, as soon as this plant gets bigger, you don't want to do it when it's young or you're taking a large percentage of its growth. This leaf right here that's sitting at a node will be pinched off. Do it right now. Chink. Because the node is already taken off. I won't do it if the node hasn't grown yet. And if I do, I'll strip the node with it. But if the node is already taken off on its own, this is my theory, that the leaf has put in its energy to that area. And of course, plants spread and distribute their energy throughout the plant. And there are auxins, or the hormones are auxins in the growing tips, which, so when you bend a plant, a new tip will begin to take off. And there's a lot to learn, but I think that each plant's going to respond its own way. If you defoliate an entire plant, you're going to have problems. But for me, removing the large fan leaves, at least the ones that are not as necessary, does create more light to the lower branches and does give bigger buds. And I can't prove that, but only through reading article after article of growers who are 30 and 40 years in and saying, I've been doing this, it's the only way. One guy said he grew for 35 years before he realized that using a scrog with defoliation was the best method to get a yield, the best yield. And these are people who are tried and true over years. You can only trust a person so much, but when you see the before and after photos, and then you apply it yourself, well, I remove my fan leaves. And in fact, I just defoliated my veg garden yesterday. You can see down here, these are all just pruned down to nothing. You can see that there's still lots of fan leaves on them. That's the thing. I don't remove them all. Just remove the ones that are not benefiting the plant as far as I see it. And I ask my plants. I feel my plants out to see what they want, And I think that there's one more point I wanted to cover, and I guess these are just all things that are on the top of my head. The thing about defoliation, the thing about the lighting, those are major important things for people. But I think the most important thing that I wanted to relay in this video was about toxic heavy metals. Now, cannabis is called an accumulator. It's an accumulator plant, which means that it will accumulate toxic metals, heavy metals, and it stores them within the cell walls, and they don't go away. Cannabis was planted around Chernobyl to help to absorb heavy metals and radiation, just like some funguses are also used for that. And they're doing that in Japan right now with Fukushima, using certain mushrooms to try to, and that's what plants do. You see, plants have been here for forever, absorbing information and creating genetics that assist not just the plant itself, but the environment. You see, a plant needs a healthy environment. So a plant needs to be able to, you know, each one has its own, you know, benefits. Being an accumulator is a horrible benefit to a plant because, and this is the key, I have a friend who, we grew or outdoor gardens with the same type, the same strain. The difference is his guy he says he uses nothing but just fish guts, or just raw fish. Goes down and he gets loads of it and he fertilizes with nothing but fish. And then let's take the other guy on the other side of town, some random Joe Blow who's using nothing but chemical fertilizers for his yield. Now the fish one will probably taste better. Maybe, maybe not, depending on how well they're flushed or how well the person takes care of the plants. Major part of it is how you maintain, not necessarily what you use. The guy who's using the chemical fertilizer is killing the microbes and the beneficial mycorrhizae networks within the soil, which is something that years ago people didn't even consider. I inoculate my soil with various bacillus species which are supposed to facilitate uptake of nutrients for the plant, and they seem to work fantastic. I also use them outdoors, which builds a network outdoors. When you use heavy salted fertilizers, they annihilate the soil network, the system. Most growers know this. With fast-paced grows that only last a few weeks, 6-week harvests, when you're going into the bloom, a lot of people don't care. I don't use organic soil. I use a neutral hydroponic type soil that I just add nutrients to. And I use a combination of fertilizers. But anyway, we go back and say, here's the guy who's destroying the soil and accumulating salt in his soil, and that's harmful to the plants. Here's this guy who's growing organic, and you would think, I want his plants, It's grown with natural sources. Once I learned about the heavy metals, my first thought was this. All these people out here who are using fish fertilizer, thinking that it's a great thing, don't realize that these fish they're using have been living in the oceans and the rivers and absorbing mercury and toxic metals. All of the metals and mercury that are in that fish go into the plant and remain there. That's a heartbreaking thing for a lot of people to hear. I've never heard anyone even mention it. It's never even come up. This all came to me when I was I was researching fish fertilizer because I was using Alaska fish fertilizer, bloom fertilizer, for my plants. And I thought, there's something about this that just, I have to, there's got to be something about this. Because it works great, but it says toxic, metal levels can be seen at this website. So I went to the website and looked it up. Found out Alaska fish fertilizer has 10 times the allowed amount of, arsenic, for, consumables. And you're not even allowed to use it in a lot of places. A lot of fertilizers aren't allowed to be used in a lot of places. And I thought, okay, so this is loaded with arsenic, so I'm not going to use it. At that point, I didn't know that cannabis was an accumulator. I just assumed I don't want metals in my plant. But now that I know that, it even confirms my suspicion. So, no, I'm not a professional commercial grower. No, I don't have all the expertise of, the know-how and all the scientific botany knowledge, and I don't have any degrees in botany. But I've been growing cannabis for a long time, and I have been smoking cannabis for a long time, and I've been researching cannabis for a long time, and I want to know as much as I can about it, so I come out to try to share these things with people in hopes that, maybe we can, it'd be interesting to have a plant tested for heavy metals, grown under different conditions. But ultimately, two growers in different areas, even growing the same exact strain from the same mother plant, are going to have different environments, different grow rooms, different pests, different diseases. So what we're looking for is something that we can all use together, which is, what do we do with organics? You can go with, I'm thinking that a good thing, one thing that might not be as harmful might be mushroom compost and worm castings are two that are probably okay. Probably. But just remember this, that everything that is natural has been consuming something else that is natural. And you have to break it down to the original consumption and say, is it harmful? Are heavy metals ending up in this? And that's just metals. I haven't even gotten into anything else, specific diseases and whatnot. But, some growers say they grow with dirty, rotten old soil, not rotten, but you know, just soil from outdoors. They started outdoors, they move it in. Some guys even have mushrooms in their grow room and don't care. Say it makes the plants sweeter, they don't care, they just thrive in it. Other guys are so particular and clean about their grow rooms that they won't even allow a fly in there without freaking out. And I'm somewhere in the middle. You know, I keep a clean grow room, I keep it swept up, keep my plants clean, but I won't allow, you know, myself to become obsessed about every single, you know, piece of dust that comes around or every single bug. There have been times when I've had bugs in my soil, like the root flies and stuff, you know, but with the setup I have now, I use mycorrhizae in my soil as well as an antifungal. They're all in one. It's a Pro Mix BX soil mix. And to that I add some beneficial microbes, a tablespoon of some wood ash, hardwood ash, and then I do my transplanting and go from there. But I prefer to use chemical fertilizers because they're easier to control. I use Fox Farm fertilizer right now. I'd really like to go organic, but at this point in time, I'm having good results. And this is kind of the point I wanted to make too, because it's difficult for growers to switch, to experiment, because especially in a lot of places it's illegal. I mean, you can't, if you take a risk on a plant, you're going to kill it, you know, or you might kill it. So every time I have a few plants going, I do experiments on one and not on the other, you know, and I try to see what works and what doesn't, and share it as best I can. So to all the growers out there, you know, I guess I just wanted to share those main points about defoliation, about hours, or daylight hours, and about pests and stuff. But the heavy metals was really the main point I wanted to convey, because who knows? I don't understand. I haven't looked into the science behind vaporizing metals or smoking pot with heavy metals, but I do know that a lot of people are taking cannabis for medical reasons. And if growers are using heavy organic amendments with a lot of mercury, various metals in it, and then people are eating that, you know, could be doing damage too. So everybody just has to consider all the aspects. So happy growing, and have a great day, everybody.